Good morning. I'd like to welcome you. Thank you so much for coming today to our 6th annual consumer conference called Stepping Forward, Staying Informed. The conference is part of our Stepping Forward, Staying Informed consumer education program, which is a 2-part program, an annual conference, which occurs each year in the fall, and you're here today for our 6th annual conference, as well as a bi-monthly evening lecture series. The overarching objective of the program is to provide an opportunity for individuals with spinal cord injury to learn about the latest research, emerging treatment techniques, and quality of life issues from leading scientists and clinicians across the country. Since its inception, we have provided educational opportunities to over 1,500 individuals, approximately 50% of whom are individuals living with spinal cord injury. This year, we have also made this conference available nationally. We are streaming live over the internet to individuals in their homes across the country. Thank you to all of you who continue to support this program by attending the lectures and the conference. I'd also like to thank all the staff and volunteers who are here today. Without you, we would not be able to put on this program, and so we're very grateful to your dedication to the program and to people living with disabilities. I'd also like to thank the speakers who are here today. We have Susan Howley from the Reeve Foundation. We have Mark Nash from the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis, and we have Suzanne Groa from National Rehabilitation Hospital. Dr. Sherry Lavella was also supposed to be here to speak after lunch, but Dr. Lavella unfortunately had a death in her family late Thursday evening and is unable to make it. So what we had decided was that we would extend each of the speakers' question and answer time so they could take some extra questions and answer them from the audience. So Dr. Lavella unfortunately will not be here to give her talk. I'd also like to thank the funders for this year's conference, which is the Paralyzed Veterans Association. The PVA has been so generous in supporting this conference over the years, and we're very grateful for that. And we're very grateful for Deb, who has been an overarching supporter of ours with the PVA. I'd also like to thank the sponsors who are out front, and those include South Shore Medical Supply, Restorative Therapies, Aero Innovative Research, Allergan, BrainGate 2, Right Away, and Rogerson's Orthopedics. I'm also very excited today because one of the most delightful women that I know is going to be emceeing our program today, Lisa Himmerly. Lisa and I have known each other for a long time. Lisa was one of the first patients I treated when I came to Boston Medical Center almost 11 years ago. Lisa is the Deputy Director of the Economic Initiative at the Boston Redevelopment Authority. In 2007, Lisa graduated with honors from the Kennedy School at Harvard University with a master's in public administration. In 2000, soon after her spinal cord injury, she founded the New Hampshire chapter of the National Spinal Cord Injury Association, which she ran until 2008. And after 8 years, the organization was merged with the Granite State Independent Living Center, the state's largest cross-disability services providing nonprofit care to people with disabilities. Prior to that, Lisa worked as a CPA with KPMG as an auditor and a consultant for both domestic and international banks traveling around the world. She's an active member within the New England spinal cord injury community and serves as a valuable member of our advisory board at the New England Regional Spinal Cord Injury Center. Besides the U.S., she has lived in Germany, the Netherlands, and China, and traveled extensively. We are honored to have Lisa today as our MC. And so I will welcome Lisa up to begin the program. A couple of other things that I'd like to remind you is that, and Lisa will also remind you of these things, but there are evaluations. If you'll be sure to fill out the evaluations at the end of the program, there are also suggestion areas for future topics, in particular for the bi-monthly lecture series. And the bi-monthly lecture series is really consumer-driven, so the topics that you put are the topics that you will hear in the upcoming year. As well, if you get up to leave the room, if you'll make sure to just push your chair, if you're sitting in a regular chair, if you'll just push your chair back into the table, this helps to keep the aisles clear so that people who are in wheelchairs can navigate the room. So it's very important to make sure that you push your chair, if you're in a regular chair, back in toward the table when you rise. So once again, I'd like to welcome Lisa, and thank you so much for being here.
you. Good morning, everyone. I'm a little nervous, so if everybody could just say good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here today and to be here with all of you and to have the honor of emceeing this wonderful event. Just a few administrative items before I introduce our speaker. We just want to make sure that everybody turns off their cell phones, and we want to just ask everybody to not use Wi-Fi because we are streaming live over the internet right now. Another thing is that we are recording today, and the recording will be available in about January on DVD, just so you know that. Also, there are volunteers around the room, and they have blue tags on. So if you have any problems, if you just want to let them know, and anything from the temperature to where the facilities are and things of that nature. We're also going to have a Q&A session, as Steve mentioned, at the end of each speaker, and I'm going to come up and facilitate that. And there'll be volunteers around the room with mics, and if you could just wait until a volunteer comes to you with the microphone so that we make sure to actually hear your question and to get it recorded. So you will be on TV. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, our first speaker. Susan Howley is the Executive Vice President of Research for Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. She started her career in the spinal cord injury field in 1982 as the Director of Administration for the Stifle Paralysis Research Foundation, and then became the Executive Director of the American Paralysis Association. And today she serves as the Executive Vice President, as I said, for research at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. She was charged with implementing a strategic expansion of the Foundation's research program, which included the development of the Transitional Research Fund, the North American Clinical Trials Network, and the Neuro Recovery Network. Please join me in welcoming Susan Howley. Yeah, it is a long walk.
Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to be here. I want to thank Dr. Williams for inviting me. I'm not a scientist. I don't have a PhD or an MD after my name. So what I do is administer the research programs of the Reeve Foundation. It is true that I got into this field back in the early 80s when there really wasn't much going on. And in a sense, you can almost think about the story of the American Paralysis Association and the Reeve Foundation as a metaphor for what's gone on in the field of spinal cord research. Back in the early 80s, we talked about a cure for spinal cord injury. And gradually, over the ensuing years and decades, basic science began to unearth the complexities of the spinal cord and, frankly, of injury. And people living with spinal cord injury began to raise their voices about what it was that they wanted from science. And as you'll see in some of the slides that I'm going to show you about the research that the Reeve Foundation has funded, as the field has matured, it's expanded. So when we began back in the early 80s, we funded regeneration research because that was the holy grail, as many people like to say. Gradually over the years, a variety of different kinds of research began to be introduced. And so today, for example, we focus a lot of our research dollars on the rehabilitation end of the spinal cord injury continuum. Not building better wheelchairs, there are organizations out there that do an admirable job of that, but really looking at the underlying biology of injury and certain kinds of rehabilitation. So it's been an amazing journey, I think, for the field, for all of you who are living with spinal cord injury, and certainly for me personally. So we, along with several name changes over the years, have adopted a new tagline, which is today's care and tomorrow's cure. And I just want to address that for a minute. So back when we were the American Paralysis Association, our exclusive focus was research. When Chris was injured and he decided to join the American Paralysis Association, Dana began to express her experience as a caregiver and as Chris's wife. And we often quote her as saying that when Chris was spinal cord injured, it was like landing on the moon without a roadmap. And she began to advocate very, very vocally for care. Her emphasis was on the quality of life for Chris and her family. And at that point in time, APA had nothing addressing the quality of life issues. And it was really out of Dana's concern. You all know that Chris was single-minded. He was all about research and developing treatments and cures for spinal cord injury. But it was really because of Dana's focus that we started the Christopher and Dana Reeve Paralysis Resource Center. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a bit, but that's really the backstory behind today's care and tomorrow's cure. So essentially, we're a nonprofit organization. We're dedicated to developing, funding research to develop cures for spinal cord injury, but also to improve the quality of life for people living with paralysis. And our community is certainly broader than just the obvious suspects. So it's everyone who's newly injured. It's those who are living with paralysis now, their families, their caregivers, their friends, healthcare providers, very, very critical element in our field, scientists, and certainly society at large. About 2.5 years ago, the Resource Center commissioned the largest study of paralysis ever. When I started back in the early 80s, everybody talked very wisely about an approximate 250,000 people being spinal cord injured and another 10 to 12,000 being injured on an annual basis. And interestingly enough, the 250,000 number never changed. It never changed. So I don't know what happened to the newly injured, but they were never added into the mix. And when Chris was injured, he, as Chris was wont to do, said that number can't be right. So he used 450,000. And we decided that the time had come to really do a prevalence study. So this was a telephone survey of 33,000 households. And paralysis was defined in this instance using the World Health Organization definition. And what we found was that there were 5.5 million people who reported living with some form of paralysis. And you can see the breakout of the etiology. So stroke at 29%, multiple sclerosis 17%, really surprisingly, spinal cord injury at 23% of those who had reported some degree of paralysis. And the causes of so 1.275 million people living with spinal cord injury paralysis, a far cry from 250,000 or even from Chris's 400 or 450,000. And I think what's important here is that it gives us strength in numbers in terms of providing more dollars for research, in terms of providing more dollars for quality of life initiatives, and also in terms of dealing with the insurance industry. And you can see here that causes range from motor vehicle accidents at 24%, but interestingly, accidents among people working very hefty 28%, falls 9%. So the numbers are certainly shifting away from car accidents, and partly this, I think, reflects the aging population in our country generally, the falls, the accidents at work. So the foundation also has a series of quality of life programs wherein we award grants to nonprofit organizations that provide services to individuals with paralysis, regardless of the cause. These quality of life grants are not limited to spinal cord injury. And the program was started, thanks to Dana, in 1999, and we've awarded about 1,600 grants totaling close to $13 million. Most of them are grants awarded to organizations here in this country, although there have been some awards that have been made internationally. And basically, the awards break out into three areas of actively achieving, bridging barriers, and caring and coping. It's really a remarkable program. And then just a little bit about the Paralysis Resource Center. So this is a program that is wholly funded through a cooperative agreement with the CDC. And it promotes the health and well-being of people living with a spinal cord injury, mobility impairment, and paralysis by providing comprehensive information, resources, and referral services. So we have a cadre of information specialists at the foundation office who man the phones and respond to emails. We have a lending library. We have streaming videos. Our Paralysis Resource Center website, the Paralysis Resource Guide. We have copies outside at our table. It has been translated into a number of languages, and roughly we are receiving about 300 requests a month for assistance. And it's interesting, these are not largely newly injured people. Most of the calls that we get at the Resource Center come from people who are chronically injured, who are dealing with everything ranging from insurance problems to accessibility issues to you name it. And so it really is a remarkable resource. The most frequently asked questions, interestingly, are about pain management, money, cure research, and insurance problems. And as you can see, the paralysis.org website is available in 8 languages and has about 15,000 unique visitors a month seeking online information. What's fascinating is that this is a resource that is used internationally, and we get hits from countries literally all over the world. And these are the client services that are provided by the Resource Center. So if you're not familiar with it, I would really encourage you to stop by the table and pick up some literature. So now to the research end of things. When we began in 1982, the scientific dogma was once damaged, the spinal cord could never be repaired. And Reggie Edgerton, who's a neuroscientist at UCLA, has a favorite saying that back then that spinal cord research was considered to be the graveyard of neurobiology. They were pretty bleak days. The patient dogma was that there was nothing more than a small, very isolated population that had been relegated to the sidelines. There was a lack of awareness about spinal cord injury. There were certainly no treatments other than standard medical care. There was very little in the way of effective resources or quality of life initiatives for people with spinal cord injury. So back then, in those early years, the community hallmarks were very little credible spinal cord research, no real appreciation for the complexity of the spinal cord or for its potential to repair, and outcroppings of small family foundations like the one I started with, the Stifle Foundation in Short Hills, New Jersey, but also the emergence of the American Paralysis Association and the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis, both of which I think began to finally shine a spotlight on this injury. So today what I hope to share with you is sort of the thinking that went into the development of the Reeve Foundation research programs. This was a stepwise process. We began back in the early 80s the way most small research funding organizations begin. We still do this to this day. We give out relatively small pots of seed money. Grants to get a new idea started for an investigator so that he can collect the data he needs and then go on to larger funding sources like the National Institutes of Health. These seed grants also are used to entice more established investigators to begin to apply their skills and knowledge to spinal cord injury and repair. And so our first program, and the only one we had for many, many years, was our individual grants program, which develops new knowledge and new talent. And again, these grants now are 2-year grants, $75,000 a year, maximum $150,000 for established investigators. And then we also offer a slightly less rich 2-year postdoctoral fellowship. And this is actually our largest program. In a good year, we fund well over $4 million in new individual grants. We give them to investigators all over the world. I will tell you that all of our programs are actually driven by independent scientific advisory panels. I don't make the decisions about where we invest our research dollars. I only have the great job of actually giving the money away. But it's independent scientific peer review panels that actually make funding recommendations to our board of directors, and then our board authorizes the actual funding. So the individual grants, as you'll see, is overseen by something we call the Science Advisory Council. Back in the mid-90s, several scientists on our Science Advisory Council came to us and said, you know, we think the field is mature enough to add perhaps a new way of doing research. Keep the individual grants program going strong, but what about developing a collaboration network of basic scientists? And so the foundation started its International Research Consortium, which has changed over the years, but which is still going strong. More recently, as the science has progressed and matured, we've developed 2 standing clinical networks, the Neurorecovery Network and the North American Clinical Trials Network. And we'll talk more about those. So this schematic just shows you that all of our programs are focused on one thing, and that's the development of new spinal cord therapies that are going to promote recovery of function, improved health, and enhance the quality of life for people who actually are spinal cord injured. So this is a little bit about our individual grants program. Its mission is to cast a wide net and to fund the development of treatments for paralysis and other dysfunctions that are caused by spinal cord injury. And the grants range across the entire spectrum, from neuroprotection, trying to develop interventions to limit the extent of paralysis at the time of injury or even stop it completely, regeneration, growth inhibition. I'm sure all of you are familiar with the fact that in the adult brain and spinal cord there are inhibitory proteins that work against regeneration, and so one of the things that is a very big player in the field is how to deal with these inhibitory proteins. Remyelination, axon guidance. It's great to get regeneration, but you have to get these guys to make the appropriate hookups. Therefore, how do we send them to the right address once we've prompted their regrowth? Rehabilitation, again, this is not about rehab equipment. This is about how do you use rehab from a biology perspective. And then more recently, we actually have a very full portfolio of projects that actually address the health-related consequences of paralysis, bowel, bladder, pain, spasticity, sexual function. Since 1982, through this program, we've made 633, let me correct that, we've funded a total of 633 labs around the world to the tune of almost $50 million. The other thing that we started about 10 years ago, and of course this will resonate with all of you because what Dr. Williams and his team are doing here is the kind of thing that we have attempted to do with our spinal cord symposium. One of the things that we became acutely aware of is that there really wasn't a lot of dialogue between the patient community and basic scientists. And so 10 years ago, we started with our individual grantees, holding a meeting every other year where our active grantees were expected to come and spend a couple of days presenting their science and talking to each other and forming collaborations. And we invited members of the spinal cord community to join them. And I have to say that the first time we did it, the meeting was in Chicago, and it was an incredible high for everybody, for the patients, for the scientists, most of them PhDs, and almost all of them at that time without any kind of interaction with the patients. They were doing research supposedly to help. And my favorite quote is one after that meeting from Lynn Jakeman, who was and still is at Ohio State. And she just wrote to us and said, you know, I'd do anything to come back to another one of these meetings. It was so energizing and it was so exciting to actually rub elbows with the patients and learn from them what they want. And we had a note after that first meeting from one of our scientists who said, you know, that meeting has changed me forever. I go to my bench now in the morning and I think differently about my research. And we're actually coming up on our next meeting in a couple of months in Phoenix. What we've done this year is something new. We've actually expanded now, and we're going to include not just our individual grant awardees, but representatives from all 4 of our research programs. So I think it's going to be a very interesting meeting with the 2 clinical networks there, much more focused on sort of translation and the applied end of science. So the other thing is that we really do encourage collaboration, and so we, out of these past meetings, we've given 5, and 6 small awards for investigators who attend the meeting to do collaborative projects that come out of their interactions at that meeting. This is our Standing Science Advisory Council. This is a panel of volunteer senior scientists who actually report directly to the Research Planning Committee of our Board of Directors. And the chair of our Research Planning Committee is a wonderful gentleman by the name of Arnie Snyder, who attends all of these Science Advisory Council meetings, our consortium meetings, and he then goes back to his colleagues on the board with the Science Advisory Council's funding recommendations. And I just wanted you to see these names to see the broad representation that we have at the present time. Jackie Bresnahan is our new chair. She just took over about 6 months ago, and she's at the University of California, San Francisco. These are remarkable meetings. They last for a day and a half. We generally have about 120 or 125 research proposals to review. And these wonderful scientists give so generously of their time and their expertise, and they're so aware of what it is that people living with spinal cord injury need and want, and very aware of how difficult it is to raise research dollars. And so their recommendations are just incredible. They base their recommendations both on the scientific merit of the proposal, but also on the relevance to the Reeve Foundation's research priorities. So those are the 2 elements that are taken under consideration when they peer review these proposals. So the next program is the International Research Consortium, and essentially this is a group of pretty much basic science labs, right now 6 strong. When we started out we were 8, and we've sort of varied between 6 and 8 depending on what year it was and what had gone on. But they're looking to develop ways to repair and promote repair and functional recovery in the chronically injured spinal cord through collaborative research. One of the things that emerged from the early years of spinal cord research was the realization that the spinal cord is incredibly complex and that there is no single magic bullet, that it's going to take expertise and information from labs all over the world, and we are not going to have a single magic bullet therapy, that therapies are likely to be combinations of things. And so the thinking behind the consortium was to tap basic scientists who had expertise in a variety of areas and ask them to come together and think collaboratively about fixing the damaged spinal cord. And I have to say that this has been an experiment. It's been a very, very interesting process. Many of the original labs, for a variety of reasons, are no longer in the consortium. This program has a standing panel of senior neuroscientists and clinicians who perform the same function that the Science Advisory Council does for the individual grants program. So the consortium projects are organized around 4 themes: tissue repair, enhancers of regeneration and neural function, inhibitors of growth, and physical therapy and training. And the thinking is that integrating these 4 approaches will enhance recovery of function. There are 2 real hallmarks I want to talk about: collaboration and training. One of the elements of the program is that every principal investigator must have a postdoctoral fellow who is assigned to the consortium research. And if you know anything about the hierarchy of research labs, generally it's the postdoctoral fellows and students who actually do a lot of the lion's share of bench work. And when we started out, each of the 8 labs had 1 postdoctoral fellow. And gradually, we began to pick up steam. And at the present time, with 6 labs in the network, we've got 15 active associates. 4 labs have 2 associates each. 1 lab has 3, and 1 lab has 4. And we move them all to twice yearly meetings. They travel back and forth between and among the labs. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful training experience for them. And by my last count, we've got 40 former consortium associates who are now all out. They're independent investigators, and their labs are focused on spinal cord research. And so, again, through our postdoctoral fellowship grants in the individual grants program, as well as through the consortium, one of our imperatives is to train the next generation of spinal cord investigators. And then the other thing is this notion of doing collaborative research. And so at this point in time, there are 23 separate projects that are either underway or in the planning stages. And primarily, these projects focus on looking at combinations of interventions, not a trivial matter in spinal cord research. And then also under the consortium, we do have a fair number of stem cell projects that are underway because 2 of the labs have a real focus on stem cell biology. These are the members of the consortium right now. The Schwab lab in Switzerland and the Fawcett lab in the UK are our European representatives, and the rest of the labs are here in the United States. We just lost our most recent lab. Dr. Mary Bunge from the Miami Project to Cure Paralysis had been one of the original labs in the consortium. And Mary is, although not retiring, she still has a very active lab at Miami. But she just decided that it was really time for her to start winding down a little bit of her commitment. So she rotated out of the program at the end of last year. The other thing that we have that supports the work of these labs, which are very far-flung, is we have developed core laboratories, a viral vector lab, a stem cell lab, and then an animal lab at the University of California, Irvine, which is actually headed now by a former consortium associate. And these are the members of the advisory panel. Again, like SAC, they're senior scientists and clinicians who report to the Research Planning Committee of the board. They provide critique and commentary on consortium objectives, plans, and accomplishments. And I should say that these four individuals also do attend the meetings, and they are really, I call them my wise men, and they're awesome, all of them. And three of them are actually clinicians, two of them are neurosurgeons, and so one of the things that they serve to do is keep these basic scientists focused on the patient and focused on thinking about how one is going to deliver therapies that are in development, because that's obviously a very big challenge in this field. The Neuro Recovery Network is new, relatively new. It's about 3.5 years old, and it grew out of a line of work that has been ongoing for several decades. And the mission of this network is to provide for specialized centers that do standardized, evidence-based, activity-based therapies for people with spinal cord injury and other disorders. Initially, right now, the intervention that the NRN is deploying is something called body weight support treadmill therapy. And I'm sure most of you know that Steve Williams is the director at Boston Medical Center of the Neuro Recovery Network Center there. Some of the hallmarks of this is an enormous program, and some of the hallmarks of this are a network-wide database. So when a patient comes in and enrolls in the NRN program, we collect data on this patient, medical information about progress. Data analysis then is done, and this enables the NRN to measure how effective the program is, what the patient's outcomes and progress have been. And this is really a remarkable resource for us, but also downstream for the field, we think. NRN teams are very sophisticated. They're headed by center directors who can be a doctor, a physical therapist. They have physicians on their teams, administrative and clinical supervisors, data managers, physical therapists, and rehab technicians. This is also part of the CDC funding. These are the NRN centers. They are located at Louisville, at Tier, at Shepherd, at McGee Rehab in Philadelphia, Ohio State, Boston Medical Center, and Kessler in New Jersey. Part of the mandate for the CDC funding is that we get this therapy to as many people as quickly as possible. For those of you who know anything about locomotor training, you know that this is a very laborious intervention to deliver, and it's intensive and it's expensive. And the centers are essentially doing research. And so in an effort to expand our reach into the patient population, we conceived of a new model for the Neuro Recovery Network, and it's something that we call community-based NRN fitness and wellness centers. Basically, what we are doing is taking an activity-based exercise program into fitness and wellness centers, and a component of those exercise programs is Neuro Recovery Network locomotor training. And so this has been a very gradual process. We just now have reached 5 community fitness and wellness centers in the country. They're spread all over the place. The goal is to expand these as rapidly as we can. There are 2 challenges. The first challenge is infrastructure. And by that I mean that all of these facility teams are trained by the NRN centers. So it's a very elaborate program that is very heavily dependent on human resources. And as we think about expanding the NRN program, one of the things that we have to fit into that calculus is expanding the infrastructure, expanding the people with the expertise and the training and the knowledge to actually train the new community fitness and wellness centers as they come on board. The other challenge is money. So what happens is that the foundation gives grants to the centers and to the facilities. And those grants are used for a variety of things, including purchasing the treadmill and the other equipment that is needed for the program. But the funding, the grants can also be used to help defray the expenses, the difference between, in the case of the centers, what insurance will reimburse for and what it actually costs to deliver the therapy. At the present time, the fitness and wellness facilities do not bill for reimbursement because they're like local Ys. And so we are in the process. One of the things that we hope to be able to do through the NRN is to take all of the data that we have collected, analyze it, and begin to make a cogent argument to the insurance companies that actually this is a viable therapy, and it really does improve the health, the independence, the quality of life for people who are living with paralysis. And in the long run, if they were to invest in reimbursing for this therapy long term, they would end up with much healthier, more productive clients. We are in the process now of writing a series of papers that are going to be published in the archives of physical medicine and rehabilitation, an analysis of the data that will begin to show the kinds of outcomes and effects that we are seeing in the patient population going through the program. And I'm just going to say here that in our experience, every patient has changed. These are, let's go back and say these are people who are outpatient. Many of them are chronically injured. They have been injured for years. And everybody changes. Everybody changes differently, and right now we don't know enough to be able to predict how patient X is going to change. But we are seeing really impressive and profound improvements in things like blood pressure regulation, temperature regulation, respiration. A patient or two has actually recovered bladder function. We do have a handful of patients who are walking as a result of the therapy. Again, I don't want to overstate this, but we're very, very excited and encouraged by the results. And one of the things that I would say that we know from the basic science is that any and all therapies for spinal cord injury are going to include an activity-based component. So now we have a network already established, up and running, that can actually standardize therapy delivery, data collection, and analysis across multiple centers. So we're very, very excited about this. This is just a little bit about the community fitness and wellness facilities. Really, the goal is to provide you all with a continuum of care in your local communities. The exercise is based on current scientific and clinical evidence, and the facilities offer activity-based exercise programs that are designed specifically for people who are paralyzed to improve cardiovascular and aerobic fitness, muscular strengthening, and flexibility. And this is just a little bit about the archives. This is a 2010 winter supplement. The NRN actually applied to the archives and was given this supplement. And so these are examples of the kinds of papers that are being written, have been submitted and are under review, but we're very excited about getting this data out into the field. The Clinical Trials Network has a very simple mission. It's to move laboratory discoveries of potential therapies to the clinic, to ensure patient safety, and to use the kinds of outcome measures that will ensure interpretable data. One of the real challenges in the spinal cord field is this business of outcome measure. How do we measure improvement? In the lab, we have fairly sophisticated outcome measures for lab animals, but not necessarily the case for human patients. And so one of the things that NACTN, the Clinical Trials Network, is doing, and we are collaborating with a number of other groups that are also pursuing this, is we are developing and testing and validating more sensitive outcome measures so that we can detect small incremental improvements in clinical trials. There's a theory that the reason that some of the earlier spinal cord drug trials have failed is not necessarily because there was no efficacy, but because the improvement was very slight and the measures used to identify that movement were so grossly insensitive that the improvement was missed. So we're very excited about NOAA. And we have actually begun 2 projects, and 3 others are just in the process of being contracted out. We've put together an international panel of experts who constitute the NOAA task force, and so it's based on their wisdom and recommendations that we've chosen the outcome measures that we have to pursue initially. These are the NACTN sites. Again, they are all over the country. This is a program that's funded by the Department of Defense, which for very obvious reasons has a great interest in developing effective treatments for spinal cord injury. And so one of our NACTN sites is Walter Reed Army Medical Center in Washington. NACTN 2 has a data registry. We have enrolled about 400 acutely injured patients into the NACTN data registry. We are following these patients out for a year post-injury and collecting uniform medical and radiological data on these patients. And again, this is, I think, going to be a very important contribution to the field. Like the Neuro Recovery Network, NACTN centers and personnel have been rigorously trained so that their capacity to standardize the way they treat the patients, what data they collect, the way they collect it, and transmit it is all standardized. And all of the data are sent to our data management center at the University of Texas, Houston, where it's actually analyzed. So NACTN is about 3.5 years old, and we have spent those 3.5 years gearing up for our first clinical trial. It's looking at the safety aspects of a neuroprotective drug called Riluzole, which is FDA approved for use in ALS patients. This is an acute injury trial. The window for delivery of Riluzole is 12 hours. And our goal is 36 acutely injured patients. As of yesterday, we just actually enrolled our 21st at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. And as soon as the last patient has been enrolled, the safety data will be analyzed, and a decision will be made about whether to move forward to a larger efficacy trial. Riluzole is inexpensive. It's very simple to deliver, and if we can identify any efficacy at all, it would be a real boon to the field, because right now they're really, other than standard of care, isn't anything. So we're excited about this. This busy slide, I just wanted to show you graphically the way we have invested our $90 million. So these are numbers of projects. And you can see that the lion's share of money has gone into promotion of axon growth and remyelination, otherwise known as regeneration. This slide is even busier, but it shows something very interesting. It shows the maturation of the field. So the pink bars are regeneration. And you can see that that's really what we funded in the early years. And essentially what we were funding when we were particularly funding cell transplants, looking for regeneration, was fetal tissue. And we still do a fair amount of that. But you can see, for example, the black and white bars. Those are grants awarded for rehabilitation, and you can see how much more extensively we invest money into the rehab end of things in the past decade or so. The yellow is an interesting story. That's inhibition research, and the inhibitory proteins in the spinal cord were not actually identified until the late 80s, and you can see that we gave our first inhibition award back in 1989. So where we are now, certainly spinal cord is on the national and international map. We're at the forefront of public awareness. We are part of the national dialogue about research priorities, funding, and advocacy. There's a much larger patient population than previously thought. From a Reeve Foundation perspective, we've invested $90 million into research that spans bench to bedside. We have the Resource Center. The Christopher and Dana Reeve Paralysis Act has been passed. It has no money attached to it, but that is our next goal, to increase federal funding for spinal cord research. We've had the release of the survey results, some easing of restrictions on federal stem cell research, federal funding for our programs, and collaborative initiatives underway. I would just like to end by sharing an experience that I had at the end of August. There was a meeting held in just outside of Zurich, Switzerland, of spinal cord research networks, and these are networks that are funded by the Reeve Foundation and 2 European research organizations. And so it was very much a mix of basic science, translational science, and then a lot of clinical reporting as well. And after this 2-day meeting ended, our research consortium stayed on for an extra day to meet. And at the start of the consortium meeting, we decided that it would be interesting to have everybody sitting at the table, all 30 of us, just weigh in with what was our sense of the meeting and what did we find the most interesting, the most provocative, the most discouraging. And what was intended to be about a 10-minute recap ended up being a 2-hour discussion. I have to tell you that there was such excitement among these basic scientists, and we had had a similar meeting 3 years ago. And what they all said was they noted the palpable difference in the way scientists presented their science and talked about the development of interventions and therapies. And one of the questions that one of the most basic consortium investigators asked was, after sitting through this meeting, I'm wondering if we know enough conceptually to be able to walk away from the research bench and begin to follow those concepts to the clinic, begin to push them to the clinic. Or do we still need to do more basic science? And everybody chewed on that for a while. And in the end, being typical scientists, they said, both. We need to do both. We have wonderful concepts. We have great knowledge. We have to start really pushing it to the clinic. We can't stop looking because we still don't know what we don't know. And so that's money. But it's also enormous, I think, optimism and really, really resounding, a resoundingly positive comment on the progress that has been made in this field. So I thank you, and
now we're going to take some
my time
questions.
is up.
Thank you. So we're going to take some questions right now, and I just ask again for everybody to just wait until one of the volunteers is able to get a microphone to you so that we can make sure we record your question. There's a woman back here, if we could get a mic.
Hi, my name's Mary Elizabeth, and I'm here with my partner today, Jim. My question is, there was a collaborative meeting between scientists and patients or consumers that are spinal cord injured. Did you say there was going to be something in Phoenix? The next meeting?
Oh, a collaborative meeting in Phoenix?
Oh, yes, the symposium.
Or how does a person get on the agenda to participate?
If you see me afterwards, I'll take your name and contact information, and we'll get in touch with you.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Good.
I actually have a question. I wanted to know, under the Obama administration, if maybe the foundation has just felt a different environment start happening.
Yeah, well, we were obviously encouraged by what he did. I think we had hoped, along with the science community, that he would have gone a little further, but at least he did open the field to freer research. Unfortunately, the recent court rulings have thrown the field into disarray again, and it is remarkable how much the court ruling just impacts the work in labs that are receiving any federal dollars at all. And, you know, I think the current wisdom now is that it really is going to take Congress is going to have to act on this in order to just clear the decks and let unfettered research continue.
Mm-hmm. There's a gentleman right here towards the front. Mike is coming for you.
Arthur Torrey from Billerica, Mass. I'm wondering what research has been going on trying to get recovery for just straight ischemic damage to his spinal cord. And also, I just heard about the injection or something that they put some stem cells in a person at Shepherd. I don't know if they'll be talking about that later on today, or you could give us any update on what the patient's progress is.
Could you restate the first part of your question? Because I think the second part, we're going to actually have somebody about the stem cells being injected directly. I think we're going to refer to that a little bit later. So we'll get that question answered for you. But could you restate your first part?
The first part is just ischemic spinal cord damage. Have they done any major progress on that in terms of getting recovery for that? Ischemic damage, I should say.
Ischemic. It is certainly part of our research portfolio. I would have to tell you that I don't think we've invested an enormous amount of money into it, not because we're not interested, but because we fund what comes to us via research proposals.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There's a woman here.
You know what? In terms of the scientific progress that has actually been made in that area, I'm going to encourage you to speak to one of the actual scientists who are here and who are going to be speaking later, and they can address that, I'm sure.
My name is Christiana Arekosima. I'm from the Multicultural Independent Living Center of Boston. My question is, from all your research, has there been any indication or possibility for a spinal cord injury person to work again in the future?
From all the research, has there been any indication? Just repeat the last.
Has there been any indication or a possibility for that a person with spinal cord injury could be able to walk again?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. And, you know, the answer that I would give you there is that there are therapies that are being tested in labs all over the world using animals, where animals do recover an ability to walk. Again, it's not perfect, it's not pretty, but it can be functional. One of the challenges is translating what is reasonably successful in an animal model into a human being. And, but again, that's the goal of regenerative therapies. If you go back and think about what we talked about a little bit when I was describing the Neuro Recovery Network, we know that for some patients with certain kinds of injuries, activity-based therapy can actually promote some recovery of walking ability. So,
without minding how many years, like how long the person has been paralyzed?
you know, in the Neuro Recovery Network, we've had patients who are chronically injured 15, 20 years post-injury who have changed, and Dr. Williams could certainly speak to that. You know, one of the things we don't know is how to predict how a patient's going to change. It's one of the things that we're trying to learn by collecting all of the data that we are and studying these patients in the Neuro Recovery Network. But yes, the answer is that chronically injured patients can change too. You don't have to be acutely injured.
We have a woman up front here.
Good afternoon. My name is Louise Beach, and I'm also at the Multicultural IL Center of Boston. I'm a senior, and I'm noticing more and more that seniors are having more falls, and women over the age of 55 are coming down with spinal stenosis, which causes them to have the ability not to be able to walk after a while because of the severity of the pain. I live in a minority community, and I go to the Roxbury YMCA. I'm a blind swimmer. I was trying to find out in the area of the minority community in the city, is there any way to find out about funding so that we can get women to, in the inner city, to go to the Ys? I know there's one in Quincy, but right in Roxbury there's one, to go there to be able to strengthen themselves up and be able to get the ability to use their limbs even more. Is anything set up for that?
Dr. Williams is going to answer that.
So I can answer that question.
Thank goodness.
So as you ask if there are opportunities for women, in particular people who are over the age of 55, to participate in exercise activities around the city of Boston. And there is an exercise program for people with disabilities and for elderly people, obviously, at all Ys for YMCAs for elderly people, but in particular the Quincy YMCA is set up for people with disabilities to participate, and there are specific evenings of the week that there are therapists there who volunteer their time to help people with spinal cord injury participate in exercise programs with adapted equipment. Yes, so what I was just getting ready to say is that there are other YMCAs around the city, not every YMCA, but there are other YMCAs around the city that have accessible pools for swimming and do have some accessible equipment. The YMCA in Quincy was very fortunate because the Travis Roy Foundation made a donation to that YMCA to help start that program with the Shepherd Center at the Quincy YMCA, and it has continued to thrive there, and I have volunteered there myself, and so I know it's a very strong program. But I suggest that if people are interested in specific YMCAs, that you contact the YMCA in your community, because you can then find out what equipment is available and if it's adapted, and if there are people who volunteer there to help people with disabilities participate in exercise. As well, one of the things that I would tell you is that the YMCAs across the country offer scholarships for memberships based on each person's individual income. So to join a YMCA does cost money, but there are scholarships, and sometimes YMCA membership is free based on a person's income. So that's another way of getting free exercise at an accessible gym.
I'm a member of the Y. What I'm talking about is in regards to, we're talking about spinal cord injury. Is there a way that they can get funding so that they can have the extra equipment in the, or be able to have people come in and volunteer to assist?
So the question is there a way that various YMCAs around the city can have funding to have equipment as well as people? So I think that as YMCAs around the city hear from the people in their community that that is wanted, that those YMCAs will be encouraged to apply to various foundations to fund that equipment. So once again, I would say advocate for yourself by contacting your local YMCA and letting them know that you are interested in this type of program in your community, and encourage them to look at beginning programs as well as looking for funding to purchase the equipment so that people who have disabilities can come to that local YMCA. Does that answer the question? You're welcome.
Okay. We have another question right here.
Hi, my name is Carol from New Hampshire. I've always felt fortunate that I got injured after the Reeve Foundation was established and putting a lot of research in. My question is just how the foundation has been so instrumental in moving forward with spinal cord injury awareness and research. How financially are you set to continue to be a viable resource for people? Your foundation itself, I mean, everything takes money, and is your foundation a healthy, able to?
So the question is the foundation set for the financial future? But how much, or basically, how can all of us help to make sure?
So it's a good question. We are not an endowed foundation, so we start every year at ground zero, raising the money that we need. And over the years, our board has developed a very rigorous process for grant making. So we don't award a grant, we don't write a contract to award a grant until the money for the entire grant is in the bank. But we are not guaranteed anything. We raise money just like so many other nonprofits do. An endowment is something that our board actually has talked about, and we are in the planning stages for that. It clearly makes sense. We're in this for the long haul. But even with our CDC and Department of Defense grants, we work very hard for those, writing proposals and submitting reports and just marching to those drummers. So, you know, we have a whole team of people, one of whom, Trish Stush, is here today with me, who do nothing but think about fundraising. I wish I could tell you we just had to think about quality of life and research, but not the case.
There's a gentleman with a question right here.
Mark Ryder from New Hampshire. You mentioned that the Christopher and Dana Reeve Paralysis Act passed earlier, and right now there's no monies, I guess, budgeted through that process. Can you describe where we are in that legislative process to get increased funding through that Paralysis Act?
Yeah, so we have developed a series of steps that we're going to go through. We have congressional champions who push the act and who are very interested in putting money behind it now. And we actually have a meeting with people at NIH in a couple of weeks to open that dialogue and start. This would not be money for the Reeve Foundation. This would be money for the field. And, you know, would clearly be proposal driven and peer reviewed and all of that. But it would not be money that we would control. It would be money for the field.
Is there anything as a community that we can push that process forward?
My experience in Washington is that nothing happens quickly. And of course, the economic climate is such that it's, I understand that the government is making Sophie's choices all over the place. On the other hand, I think that there's a really compelling argument to be made about where the field of research is now and how new money, added money, could really, really push it forward. So we're optimistic.
Great. Are there any other questions right now? Oh, we have a gentleman in the back there.
Hi, I'm Rob Eist from Brookline. My question is, I've been injured a long time, but I see that there's some procedures that are being done now for people who are newly injured, like today or yesterday or even tomorrow, that there's immediately when they're injured, there's some treatments that can be done which apparently have had some success in turning around the paralysis for a newly injured person. A, is this correct? And B, is most of the research being spent on those people or more for the people who've been injured for several years or, the aging population of spinal cord injured people?
So this is chronic versus acute. Yeah. So we fund actually probably at the end of the day more on the acute end of the spectrum, but we certainly have a very broad neuroprotection research portfolio. And again, the scientists and doctors in the room can speak to this better, but my understanding has always been that people understood that the early breakthroughs were likely to come in the acute area simply because it's easier to prevent something or limit it than it is to reverse what has been the damage that's been done. And so I think, for example, NACTIN testing really is it's a very low bar, and if we can preserve some nerve function, that would be awesome. Right now we don't have anything to do that effectively. And so, yes, we certainly should be investing in the acute end of the spectrum, but the lion's share of our money has gone into chronic injury.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question?
Over here.
Oh.
To your left.
Oh, I can't see. I'm sorry. I couldn't see you.
For research purposes, do you look into the complete or incomplete injury? Like, do you differentiate between the two?
Okay. Neither one of us got that.
For research purposes, do you look into a complete injury differently than you would an incomplete injury?
So complete versus incomplete.
Otherwise?
Complete versus incomplete injury.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I mean, we have no limits on that kind of thing. So, again, incomplete, obviously, by definition, is perhaps slightly lower bar than complete. But no, we actually fund a considerable amount of complete injury work.
Does anyone else have a question? We have one over here.
I saw that you said you had a collaborative meeting with the people from out of the United States. Do you find that their research is further along than ours?
No. The interesting thing is that, at least from the Foundation's perspective, there's been an enormous amount of back and forth and collaboration and we fund a lot of science in Europe. I think everybody is excited by the fact that the dialogue has been opened and that these research networks are actually talking to each other. And so, for example, our clinical trials network is working with a comparable network in Europe on our databases, on merging our databases so that we would have a much larger pool of very carefully documented patients. And so, I think that, again, this is all part of the very promising state of the field right now.
Looks like we have gotten to the. Is there someone?
A couple of times.
Okay, I think there's someone in the back here.
With the renewed interest in stem cell research, what processes are put in place to protect research future here in the United States?
Stem cell research.
To protect the research in the U.S. as it goes forward.
Yeah. So, scientists, nonprofit organizations, research institutions have historically always banded together. There are organizations that are devoted exclusively, well, the one that comes to mind is CAMR, really focused exclusively on protecting the right of everybody to have unfettered, responsible stem cell research pursued. And I have no doubt, remember, of course, this is going on anyway with private dollars. It just becomes much more complicated and much more onerous if you can't commingle the federal dollars with private dollars, and if you can't use a petri dish that you bought with federal funding to do embryonic stem cell research. So, the science has not been stopped, but it is certainly incredibly more challenging and difficult and time wasting. So it's a very frustrating situation. I'm sure it will be resolved, hopefully soon.
We have time for one more question, and there's a woman in the back.
I'm wondering what availability of expertise and advocacy there is for families who are trying to work with insurance companies to provide for intensive home therapy exercise machines such as fees, bicycles, or other things like that. We've seemed to run into a huge black box. Nobody knows what we're talking about when we go to our insurance company. And I'm wondering what resources there are for us to talk to people who can help us out and speak on our behalf.
Yeah, so talking about insurance resources.
And advocacy for insurance.
Yeah. I would be happy to talk with you offline about this, but this is something that our resource center information specialists are very highly steeped in. And so let's you and I connect afterwards.
And you're going to be available during lunch to talk to people?
Yeah.
So, great.
Okay. All right.
Great. Thank you so much. Please, a round of applause, please.